Welcome to the deep dive. Today is Saturday, June 6th, 2026, and we are jumping into a really fascinating scene from the Gospel of Mark.
Yeah, it's a great passage.
Right. So we're looking specifically at chapter 12, verses 38 through 44, and we're going to unpack what's usually called the widow's mite.
Which is just such a classic story.
It really is. And the goal today is to kind of rethink what it actually means to be completely generous, to surrender totally to God. But to really understand the widow, we have to look at the warning Jesus gives right before she even shows up.
Oh, absolutely. That warning is, well, it sets the entire baseline for this story. I mean, Jesus is talking to this crowd, and he goes straight after the scribes.
The religious elite, basically.
Exactly. The religious, legal, and academic elite of first-century Jerusalem. He paints this incredibly vivid picture of, performative piety.
Yeah, these are guys who just love walking around in these long flowing robes. They demand to be greeted with, deep respect in the marketplaces.
Right, and they want the best seats in the synagogues.
Always the best seats. And at banquets, too. And they top it all off by making these massive theatrical prayers just completely for show. It kind of reminds me of modern-day virtue signalers, like status-obsessed influencers. Isn't Jesus basically calling out that timeless human flaw of letting ego hijack your spiritual life?
He definitely is.
Yeah.
And, those long robes weren't just a random fashion choice either. They were sort of the ancient equivalent of driving a six-figure sports car to a charity gala.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it was a deliberate physical barrier. It was designed to say, I am set apart and I am superior to you. But the real gut punch is the dark irony Jesus points out next.
Right, because while they're demanding all this public honor, Jesus says they are literally devouring widows' houses.
Which is such a dark image.
It's a visceral phrase. But how did that actually work? Were they physically going in and taking their homes?
Well, no, it was more of a systemic legal exploitation. So in that society, a widow had very few legal rights, right? She couldn't easily manage her deceased husband's estate.
So the scribes would step in.
Exactly. Being the legal experts, they often acted as trustees or legal guardians. But instead of protecting these vulnerable women, many of them would just drain the estates.
Under the guise of what? Administrative fees?
Administrative fees, yeah. Or by demanding exorbitant hospitality. They would basically force widows to host these lavish feasts for them until the resources just ran completely dry.
So Jesus is outlining this corrupt legal system that just bankrupts vulnerable people and masks it with religion. And then, almost like it's scripted, the exact victim of that system walks right into his line of sight.
Yeah, the scene shifts perfectly to the temple treasury. Jesus is sitting there opposite the offering boxes. And historically, these receptacles were shaped like massive metal trumpets.
Metal trumpets, so they were loud.
Very loud. So when the wealthy elites came up and threw in their surplus of, heavy bronze or silver coins, it made this huge echoing racket. It was literally the sound of wealth.
So it's basically an ancient acoustic version of a giant novelty check.
That is exactly what it is. You wanted everyone in the room to hear just how much you were giving.
Right, and then this poor widow walks up, and she drops in 2 tiny copper coins, the lepta.
Yeah, which together equaled roughly a penny.
A penny. So practically weightless. It would have made absolutely zero sound.
Which is exactly why Jesus calls his disciples over right then. He tells them, this widow has just put in more than all the wealthy contributors combined.
Okay, but I have to push back on the logic here just a little bit. I mean, from a purely operational standpoint, those loud, heavy coins from the rich guys, those are what buy the bread, right? They pay for the temple repairs.
Right, the practical budget.
Exactly. The widow's penny functionally does nothing for the actual budget. So how does Jesus justify prioritizing this microscopic sacrifice over the massive utility of the rich people's gifts?
Well, because he's not evaluating a fundraising campaign. He's looking at the posture of the human heart. Jesus points out that the wealthy were giving out of their surplus, right? They dropped in money that wouldn't affect their daily comfort, their lifestyle, or their security one bit. But the widow, she gave out of her poverty. The text literally says she put in everything she had to live on.
Wow. So it's not about the monetary value at all. It's really this profound lesson about total dependence.
Precisely.
True generosity is measured by the level of sacrifice and vulnerability it requires from the giver, not the size of the gift itself.
And if you want to take that a step further, think about this for a second. Jesus knows the temple system is deeply corrupt. He literally just publicly condemned the scribes for exploiting people exactly like her.
Right.
Yet He doesn't step in and stop the widow from handing over her last cent to that very system. He lets her do it.
Wait, yeah, he doesn't stop her at all.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that say to you about the intrinsic spiritual value of a totally surrendered heart? It matters regardless of whether the system itself, quote unquote, deserves the gift.
That is a staggering thought to wrestle with, just letting go of our need to control the outcome of our giving and just trusting entirely. That is a lot to think about.
It really challenges you to look at your own life, whether it's your time, your energy, or your resources. Are you giving God your comfortable leftovers? Or are you willing to trust entirely, like the widow giving her last 2 coins?
That's the perfect question to leave everyone with. Let's close out our deep dive today with a short prayer based on this really powerful passage. Lord, free us from the desire for human praise and the safety of our own abundance. Give us the courageous, trusting heart of the poor widow that we may surrender all we have to you. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep wrestling with what it means to truly surrender, and we'll see you right back here next time.